In one of the most talked about political races of the year, Mississippi stands at a crossroad. Two highly regarded candidates, each with very different visions for Mississippi's future.
I mean, we're at a corner post in our state. We can either keep doing what we're doing, and it's not working, our economy growing at 2%, or we can invest in our kids and our people and make a difference in our state.
And I don't care where you live, I don't care where you come from, I don't even care what your political affiliation is. If you want a forward-looking conservative to lead Mississippi, I ask for your vote.
Soon, Mississippi's voters will choose which will lead them into this future. But before either can pass through these gates, they will both take this stage. Live from the University of Southern Mississippi, this is the 2019 Mississippi Gubernatorial Debate.
You are joining us live from the Joe Paul Student Theater on the campus of the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg for the first live televised Mississippi Governor's Debate of 2019. Good evening and welcome everyone. I'm Byron Brown, evening anchor for WJTV 12 News in Jackson. Joining me tonight is Greg Hurst, evening anchor for WRAG in Memphis. Our debate is being broadcast all across the state of Mississippi on television, digital, and on radio. We welcome our viewers and our listeners in Jackson and Hattiesburg, Meridian, Tupelo, Columbus, Gulfport, Memphis, Tennessee, Mobile, Alabama, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And be sure to follow us along on social media by using our hashtag. It's MSGOVDebate.
And we would now like to introduce the two candidates who have qualified for tonight's debate. The order of introduction has been determined by a random card draw. So let's begin with a Democrat currently serving as Mississippi's Attorney General. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Jim Hood. Next, a Republican currently serving as Mississippi's Lieutenant Governor. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Tate Reeves. Welcome. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for being here with us tonight. But before we get started, we do want to take care of a little business to go over some of the rules of our debate. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer questions and 30 seconds for either a follow-up question or a rebuttal. We're also going to carve out some time for individual questions for each candidate. Now, you will hear the sound of a bell right on cue when your time is up. Keep in mind, we will not have opening statements. However, each candidate will get 30 seconds for a closing statement. So, gentlemen, good luck. Let's get started. Byron has the first question.
Gentlemen, once again, we want to thank you for being here, and we hope to have a lively discussion over the next hour. We want to begin and get started pretty much with the campaign, the stories that's been dominating the last 2 weeks. It centers around an investigation into you, Mr. Reeves, and by you, Mr. Hood. This involves plans of a frontage road project that would connect Mr. Reeves' subdivision to a shopping center. In recent campaign ads, Mr. Reeves, you've said that Mr. Hood used the power of his office to punish political opponents. And Mr. Hood, you have said Mr. Reeves tried to build a road with tax dollars and got caught. Mr. Hood, you've also said that Tate Reeves was applying that political pressure. You've also said you tried to do the investigation without politics and handing the investigation off to two former Supreme Court justices, yet now we are seeing political ads about this very issue. Are you contradicting yourself? You have 60 seconds.
Well, thank you for having us. Thanks to the University of Southern Mississippi for having us here and giving us the opportunity to talk about this race. For the past 16 years as Attorney General, I have fought for working families. I brought home $3 billion for the working people of the state of Mississippi. And as governor, I want to make sure that we're able to take care of our schools and build roads. And I'm talking about public roads and not private driveways. I'm talking about things like taking care of our hospitals. Those are the three things that we need to be doing, but I'm going to pay for it by draining the swamp that Tate Reeves has created. He's cost us $7 billion. And the way he's done that, he's gotten $10 million in exchange in campaign contributions. And, that's hurt the state of Mississippi. What it has caused us is our schools, trouble in our schools, difficulties with our roads, our children leaving our state. Our economy is growing at a rate of 2%. Tennessee is growing at a rate of 23%.
The executive director of MDOT said the plan was initially approved basically because of political pressure. It was later shelved. Mr. Reeves, did you apply political pressure? 60 seconds.
This was a false story from the start. The transportation commissioner himself said it was false. The mayor who negotiated the deal said it was false. In fact, both homeowners association presidents said that it was false. But the Attorney General chose to use taxpayer funds to investigate his political opponent. And when his career investigators wrote the report, he didn't like what they said. So he admits that he personally rewrote the report, said he stayed up hours and hours rewriting the report. It's what the Greenwood Commonwealth and Tim Kalitch, who, by the way, is no political friend of mine, said was an abuse of power by the Attorney General himself.
Mr. Hood, if you truly believe Mr. Reeves got caught doing something illegal, why aren't you pursuing charges? 30 seconds.
Well, you know, the Clarion Ledger caught him. There are 15 emails from his people in his office saying the lieutenant governor needs this. He demands that. And, you know, Kenny Ray Ellis is one of them. Does he work for you? I mean, you know, he's got people that work in his office that were sending these emails. You know, every time I've been a prosecutor for 29 years, every time some convict gets caught, you know, it's like somebody knocks over a liquor store, and then the cop chases them down, and they try to blame the cop for speeding to catch them after they've done a robbery.
Mr. Reeves, do you believe that taxpayer dollars should be used for a frontage road in that community?
This was an abuse of power by the Attorney General, choosing to investigate his political opponent in the middle of a campaign. In fact, he released the report in what he believed to be the best time for him to help him in the campaign. Quite frankly, his actions would probably make Hillary Clinton and James Comey blush.
So, Mr. Hood, why not push for charges?
I'm sorry, what was your
Why
question?
not push for charges?
Well, I've left that for the
seconds.
next Attorney General. But the fact is the emails are there. The evidence is there. You can look on our website. You can see that what he did was abused his power to take advantage of a state agency. They had to have a special session because he killed their budget. I mean, he went after that state agency to build a road to his gated community that would go to a shopping center for his convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I'll let you respond. He said you abused your power. I'll give you 15 seconds to respond.
Well, we actually had a special session to deal with the Department of Transportation's budget because we were looking to spend more money on public infrastructure. We had a special session in 2018, and we chose to spend $1.2 billion more on public infrastructure across the state. $220 million per year over 5 years,
Mr. Reeves.
fixing bridges.
We'll leave it at
that.
He still hadn't answered about the emails. I mean, you got an opportunity here to explain to everybody here and people on television about the emails that were sent from your office. You said you had nothing to do with it. And in fact, that is not true.
Mr.
Will you admit that?
I'll give you 15 seconds to respond to that.
The Attorney General abused his office investigating a political opponent. Everybody knows it. Even the Greenwood Commonwealth, who is certainly no political ally of mine, has said so. And I think the people of Mississippi know it.
All right, we're going to leave it at that. We're going to get the next question coming from Greg.
And gentlemen, now we'd like to talk about another hot topic in the state, and that is teachers' pay. Now, in the past, both of you have said that you do want a pay increase for teachers, but you have very different ways of achieving that. So let's take a look. Mr. Hood, your plan, as we understand it, is a $3,000 boost in pay over 2 years, and you support yearly salary increases. Mr. Reeves, you plan to raise teacher salaries to the Southern Regional average in 2 years and increase the National Board Teacher Supplement. Mr. Reeves, can you explain in more detail why you believe your plan is both different and also better than your opponents? You have 60 seconds.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you being here with us today. The reality is that over the last 5 years, we've increased teacher pay in 2014. We increased it again in 2015. We increased it again in 2019. All told, that was about $4,000 per teacher. What I have proposed, and actually just proposed yesterday down in Gulfport with a large number of teachers standing behind me, was an additional $4,300 increase that would get us to the Southeastern average. Now, I have a history of fiscal responsibility, and I have told the people of Mississippi, I'm not just going to, in a political campaign, make promises that I can't keep. We've actually studied it, we've looked at the numbers, and we believe we can do $1,500 again next year. We can do $1,000 in year 2 and year 3, and then we can do $800 in year 4, which would be a $4,300 increase, which would get us to the Southeastern average. But I will tell you, even then, we're not going to be paying our teachers what they're worth because they're doing great work in the classroom, and what we ought to be talking about is not only teacher pay, but also improving
All right.
student outcomes.
We'll have to leave it right there. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Hood, can you explain in greater detail why you believe your plan is both different and better than Mr. Reeves? You take 60 seconds.
Skewing the facts. The teachers, if you do average teacher pay, that is the scale that you do any job. Average teacher pay in Mississippi, from 2012 to today, they're making $900 less, not any $8,000 more. In fact, just in an election year, he decides that he's going to give them $500, and they ought to be happy with $500. Well, but for those in the legislature that are pro-education, they upped it to $1,500. But we need to do more. We need to get them to the southeastern average, and then raises every year. Have those guaranteed in, because what happens is the teacher of the year is right here, Jessica Burns. A teacher of the year, Lamar County. She spent $2,000 about every year out of her own pocket to pay for supplies. And those teachers are dedicated to helping our children, and they deserve that kind of pay. And just these election year antics of coming up with these so-called paid-for raises just don't meet the burden of proof.
All right, thank you, sir. So let's explore this a little bit further. Sure, take 15 seconds here, and then we'll get to rebuttals.
15 seconds is great. Because Mr. Hood mentioned the teacher supply funds. I think that's very important because that is a piece of my teacher pay raise proposal that's not a piece of his. In fact, we've doubled the size of the teacher supply funds in the last 8 years, and I propose we double it again, go from $12 million a year to $24 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's $398. That is not enough. We can do better than making our teachers pay $2,000. I mean, Jessica is a Republican, and she's voting for me because she knows he has had a chance. It's time for us to pay our teachers what they're worth, and they've had the chance to do it, and they hadn't done it.
All right, let's dive a little bit deeper into this topic. Mr. Reeves, you released your plan the day before this debate, at least an expanded plan the day before this debate. Why did you wait? Why didn't you actually give voters a chance to see this much sooner? Take 30 seconds to respond.
Well, one of the hallmarks of my tenure over the last 8 years is I'm not going to make promises that I can't keep. And I'm not going to promise spending money that we don't have. And the reason that we waited until we got actual revenue numbers in is the fact that, over the last fiscal year, we're up $350 million over what was originally projected. In the first quarter of this year alone, we're $77 million above our original projections. It just so happens that $1,500 pay raise that we propose next year would cost $78 million, so we actually have the money in the bank to pay for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hood.
I'd like to respond. I mean, he's taking credit for money that I brought in, the internet sales tax. We attorneys general, that's where those revenues are coming from the internet sales tax. And that's what our office in the litigation before the United States Supreme Court won that case. So those revenues are because of things that I've brought back to the state, and now you see him trying to take credit for it.
We're going to get back to the revenue in just a moment, but go ahead, take 15 seconds to respond to these charges.
Well, the reality is we have a growing economy. We have more people working today than at any time in our state's history. We have 88,000 more people working today. We've cut taxes with the largest tax cut in Mississippi history. The reason our revenues are growing is because our economy is growing, and that's the reason we see increased revenues.
All right, thank you very much. And speaking of revenue, Mr. Hood, your plan, as we have analyzed it, would seemingly raise teachers' pay both faster and also sooner. So how would you pay for it? Would you use the rainy day fund? Would you use a tax increase? If you would, take 30 seconds to explain.
Well, I thought that was a 60-second question, but the fact is I'm going to drain the swamp that he created. That's where we're going to start, to find the money. When we're talking about $7 billion, I mean, we're talking about $5 billion he's turned down from the federal government for health care. It's $1 billion for the Kemper power plant. He dumped power on people here in South Mississippi for electric bills. So we're going to start with that as the swamp that he's created. We're going to drain that, and we're going to use those revenues to fix our problems.
All right, we'll now get to another 60-second question. Byron has that.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Now let's move on to the issue of Medicaid expansion. More than 300,000 Mississippians are without health care and health insurance. Both of you differ widely on this issue. And before we get to your responses, we're going to hear directly from a student here at the University of Southern Mississippi.
I have really bad asthma, so that means every time I go to the hospital, I have pneumonia. No sickness, no regular cough. It's pneumonia, and it's like life-threatening because people die from pneumonia.
Mr. Hood, you believe that Mississippi needs to expand it, but it will come at a cost down the road, the federal dollars, when the federal dollars run out. So how do you plan to keep the program funded? You have 60 seconds.
Well, we've been turning down $1 billion a year. Tate Reeves has turned down $5 billion that the federal government has offered us, and that's to keep our rural hospitals open. 5 have closed on his watch. 5 are in bankruptcy. You know, we've got to fix the problems, and the hospitals will provide the funding, the states match. It won't cost us anything. It'll cover 300,000 working people. It'll create 10,000 jobs. It will generate $100 million in additional revenue for the state. And so those are things that we can fix. And the reason that we haven't done those things in our state is because of one of the healthcare companies, for example. They gave him $262,000 to kill a bill that the Hospital Association got passed out of the House and got to the Senate and never got a hearing in committee because of those kind of campaign contributions. That is what's happened in our state, that they've taken over our legislature, and it's time for the working people to take it back.
Mr. Reeves, you have said that you will not expand Medicaid, period, no matter what you call it. So what do you say to voters like Kayla?
Well, let me first say, Byron, to you and Greg, it doesn't matter if you give him 30 seconds or 60 seconds or an hour and a half. He ain't going to answer the questions that you ask. He's just going to attack me. And the reason he's just going to attack me is because he doesn't want to talk about his liberal policy ideas that he wants to bring to Mississippi. I'm opposed to Obamacare expansion in Mississippi because while the Attorney General talks about various things, what he doesn't tell you is it's going to cost $220 million per year to expand Obamacare in our state. And the reality is I have a health care plan that's going to help bring not only affordability but also accessibility to health care in rural parts of our state. That's what we have proposed. We stood with the State Medical Association, and we have proposed having more physicians throughout the state. We have already spent $68 million on a new medical school. We believe we need more rural physician scholarship programs. We need more residency programs in places not named Jackson, places like Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And we also believe that we need more telemedicine because we're a leader in that in our state.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you.
Now, according to the independent consulting firm Navigant, 31 of Mississippi's 64 rural hospitals are at risk of closing, and more than any other state in the country. Mr. Hood, how will you protect rural hospitals from closing? You have 30 seconds.
You know, he's throwing around labels. He did that to Judge Waller, you know, because he doesn't have a plan. If you watch, he didn't answer the question. I bet a prosecutor and watch witnesses on the witness stand. He doesn't have a plan. And our rural hospitals are closing in our state. Our emergency room in my hometown closed recently, Houston, Mississippi. It's been open my whole life. My grandfather practiced there. A young lady died of an asthma attack on the streets of Houston, Mississippi because our emergency room closed on his watch. And so we have to keep our rural hospitals open, and we can do that by expanding health care and accepting $1 billion a year.
Mr. Reeves, how will you protect rural hospitals from closing? 30 seconds.
He still doesn't talk about the $220 million in new taxes that it would take to expand Obamacare in Mississippi. We have a plan that will improve not only affordability but also accessibility of care in our state. That plan includes more doctors in rural areas across Mississippi. That's through increasing the size of the medical school class from 100 all the way to 150 over the last 4 years. It includes more rural physician scholarships. We spent $28 million over the last 8 years. We need to double that over the next 8 years, ensuring that we get more primary care physicians in rural areas.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Greg now has our next question.
We certainly appreciate the audience's passion and their support, but they can kind of hold their applause down until the end. We promise we'll give them a rousing standing ovation at the very end. We know you both have supporters here, so thank you very much. We want to get as much information from you two as we possibly can. At this point, gentlemen, we would like to switch things up just a little bit, so please take a look once again at your video monitor. And as you do, you're about to hear from Southern Miss student. And our next question is regarding Mississippi's infrastructure. Take a listen.
Hello. My name is Ryan Johnson. I am a senior majoring in political science here at USM. Every day, I travel to class on Mississippi roads that are in need of repair. Whether it's a user fee, gas tax, or a toll, what is your plan to fix our state's roads and bridges?
Our thanks there to Ryan. And to reiterate, how would you seek to get more revenue to improve Mississippi's roads and bridges? And Mr. Reeves, we'll start with you. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. During the 2018 special session, The legislature chose to invest $1.2 billion more in infrastructure across our state. Now, the Mississippi Economic Council, I think we can all agree, was the primary advocate for spending more money on roads and bridges. And they asked for between $300 and $350 million. The $225 million a year is what ultimately was decided. We were able to do that without raising anybody's taxes. The first $250 million of that tranche has already been allocated, and we're going to fix 375 bridges across the state. They're already under contract, they're already being fixed throughout Mississippi. That's a good first step. We got more work to do. We have to continue to find ways to invest more money in infrastructure, because infrastructure is a core function of government. But if I'm elected governor, we're going to do it without raising anybody's taxes. The Attorney General would like to raise the gas tax. That's a fact. We don't need to raise anybody's taxes for infrastructure.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Hood, let's hear from you. How would you seek to gain more revenue to improve the state's roads and bridges? Take 60 seconds.
We agree on one thing, that we don't need any more taxes. We just have to go back and get the money he's giving away. The reason, any of y'all remember in our lifetimes 400 bridges being out? I remember back in the 60s and 70s, people out there watching on TV, we have never had 400 bridges out. This is a situation that has been created on his watch because he gave our money away. He gave away $7 billion in tax cuts and contracts and so many things. So the legislature, they have been ready to vote for a road bill to maintain our highways for 5 years. He choked that off. I go over to the legislature. On the floor of the House or the Senate, they'd come up to me. A lot of them were Republicans, and they'd put their arm around my shoulder and they'd go, me and my family are for you, but don't you tell it. And because they were supporting me to run because they knew I was going to do a road bill. And so the votes will be in the legislature. We will do a road bill first thing, but where we're going to start is at the swamp he built, that $7 billion that he's given away, and it's cost us that kind of money.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
If
Byron
I might, may I interpret what he just said
Sure,
for
take
the
15
taxpayers of the state of Mississippi? He just said he was going to do a road bill, which means he's going to raise the gas tax to pay for it. Now, he called it an easy solution. He criticized me for being against raising gas taxes. Now, during the middle of election year, he's decided it's not very popular, and so he's not going to talk about it. But he will. The first thing he's going to do, as he just said, is raise the gas tax on hard-working Mississippi families.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
There he goes making up things. He's prognosticating is what would happen if I'm elected governor. That is a Republican legislature that will be there. They're not going to pass anything crazy. They're going to do something reasonable, and he's kept them from it on the Senate and the House side. And so it's time for some leadership over there, and that's what I would do, stepping out, providing leadership.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next question with Byron.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to change gears a little bit right now. We're going to start with, we have been starting and talking about questions from both of you, but now we are going to each specific individual questions and about your campaigns. You all have each 60 seconds to respond and 30 seconds for a follow-up. There will be no rebuttal, so we are asking that you do not interrupt your fellow candidate. And Mr. Hood, we are going to start with you. The race to succeed you as Attorney General involves Republican Lynn Fitch and Democrat Jennifer Riley Collins. You have faced criticism that you are not doing enough to support a woman who is a member of your own party. Do you feel it's your responsibility at the top of the Democratic ticket to support those other Democrats who are running for statewide office? You have 60 seconds.
Well, when I ran for district attorney in 1995, my dad gave me some good advice. He said, son, you run your race and you stay out everybody else's. And I have done that, and that's been good, sage advice for me, and I will continue to do that. Now, Delbert Hoseman wouldn't endorse Tate Reeves either, so there are others on both sides that don't endorse people.
Will you endorse Jennifer Riley Collins for Attorney General?
That's what I just said. I've never gotten involved in other people's races. I run my race because it's going to be hard enough for me to win in this state, and I want to make sure that I represent Republicans and Democrats, because a lot of Republicans are going to vote for me. A lot of Judge Waller voters, people are going to vote for me. I'm going to represent them all, Republicans and Democrats. I've done it as Attorney General the whole time. I've represented people without partisanship, and that's what the people in the state of Mississippi want. They want somebody that will call balls and strikes instead of partisan politics like Tate does.
So that's a yes or no?
I'm sorry?
Yes or no? You will not endorse her? Yes or no?
Well, the answer is, I know. I'm not going to get involved in anybody's race. I've known Ricky Cole for 30 years. I've known many on both sides of races, but I don't get in their races.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Reeves, this next question is for you. And as you well know, governing a state requires working with a lot of different people to achieve different things. And with that in mind, a Republican, and actually your former opponent in the GOP gubernatorial race, Bill Waller, did not endorse you. Now, you also lost your home county in the primary and the runoff. Those are the people who followed your career and would seemingly know you best. Why do you think that you lost votes in Rankin County? And please take up to 60 seconds to respond.
Well, thank you for the question, Jim. This is how easy this is. I am for the Republican nominee for Attorney General, and I am for the Republican nominee in all statewide races. It's really not very hard.
All right.
I ran to be the Republican nominee for governor to lead our party into the future, and I'm going to support the Republican nominees in those races. As I look back to the primary, we had a very competent candidate running against us. He ran a good campaign. We were blessed that we won 74 counties throughout Mississippi, and we won the race overwhelmingly. The reality is there's only one candidate running for governor this year that is a conservative, and there's one candidate running for governor this year that is a liberal. I believe the people of Mississippi want to elect a Republican, a conservative to the office of governor, and that's the opportunity that I'm giving them to do.
Since Bill Waller did garner more than 14,000 votes in your home county, it would seem to make sense that you would reach out to him for his support. Have you asked for his endorsement?
We have asked for the endorsement and the vote of every single Mississippian. I have traveled in all 82 counties across Mississippi, and we're working hard every day to earn the vote of every single Mississippian. And that includes everybody.
All right, Mr. Reeves, thank you very much.
And thank you, gentlemen, for answering our questions during this first half of the debate. We are live from the University of Southern Mississippi.
So who will be your next governor? More questions, more answers when we come back after a short break.
And welcome back to the first live televised Mississippi Governor's Debate of 2019 at the Joe Paul Student Theater at the University of Southern Mississippi. Remember, you can follow along on social media by using the hashtag MSGOVDebate. We're joined by the candidates, Mr. Jim Hood and Mr. Tate Reeves. Greg has the first question.
Gentlemen, one of the most divisive issues in the state of Mississippi is the state flag itself, which features the Confederate battle emblem. So if you would, watch your monitors here for just a moment, because we have another question from another Southern Miss student.
I'm Lauren Hunter Gode, a political science major. All 8 of Mississippi's public universities, including Southern Miss, have stopped flying the state flag. Is it time to change the state flag, since no public universities fly it anymore?
Our thanks there to Lauren. So to reiterate, is it time to actually change the state flag, since public universities, including here at Southern Miss, no longer fly it? Mr. Hood, we will start with you. Take up to 60 seconds.
You know, a symbol should unite us. And unfortunately, right now, our flag doesn't. About half the people in our state don't like it. And, you know, nobody's suggesting that they take people's flags away. You know, it can be put in museums, put on your truck, and on your home. You know, people can fly the flag, but we need to have something that unites our people in our state. And this is one of those emotional issues that don't have a lot to do with the issues in this campaign, though. You know, the issues in this campaign are roads, bridges, and education and health care. This issue doesn't do a lot to help us.
But to get back to Lauren's question, do you think it's time to change the state flag in Mississippi?
You know, that would be up to the legislature to vote on that.
All right. Mr. Reeves, what do you think? Is it time to change the state flag, since public universities no longer fly it? You have 60 seconds.
Well, I don't think we should make public policy based just upon the decisions made on our public university campuses. I will tell you that the people of Mississippi voted in 2001 to keep the current flag. I am personally opposed to unilateral action by the legislature to change the flag. I'm opposed to unilateral action by the governor to change the flag. If the flag needs to be changed and the people of Mississippi decide that it needs to be changed, and at some point they might, then I think it ought to be changed by a vote of the people of Mississippi, not by the legislature and not by the governor.
All right. Again, if we can ask the audience just to refrain from applause, just to try to get as much information from you two as we possibly can. Thank you very much. So let's dive a little deeper into this if we can, gentlemen, because we want to ask, should public universities, if they're not flying the state flag, should they lose public funding? 30 seconds to you, Mr. Hood.
No, state law does not require universities to fly them. You know, it strictly applies to our K through 12 schools. That's what the statute says, so they don't have a duty to do that. And I think every university, every town, our government started in forts. You know, and I believe in local government rule, and I believe they should have those. They should make those decisions.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Reeves, what do you think? Should public universities lose public funding if they refuse to fly the state flag? You have 30 seconds.
Well, that was another, well, I don't know if it was a 30-second or 60-second question, but of course, again, he didn't answer the question. I believe that if you're going to receive public funds, you ought to fly the state flag.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. The next question is from Byron.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the topic of gun control. Currently, the state law does not require background checks for anyone selling firearms, but federal law dictates that licensed firearm dealers performing background checks on buyers, but does not require checks for private sellers. In the wake of the recent mass shootings in Kansas City, Kansas, El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, as governor, would you support a state law that would require background checks for all firearm sales? Mr. Reeves, we will start with you. You have 60 seconds.
Well, I believe that our Second Amendment gives us a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the National Rifle Association in this campaign, just like I was proud to have it when I ran in the primary this year. The reality is that the right to keep and bear arms gives us the ability to buy firearms, not just because we like to hunt and not just because we like to fish, but so as to protect our family in our own dwellings. And so I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I do not believe that everyone ought to have a background check on every single firearm that is purchased.
All right. Mr. Hood, would you support a state law that would require background checks for all firearm sales?
Yes, and you know, if you go in a store, you get a background check. It's just the loopholes are in, when it's a gun show, and that's where the criminals go. You know, I've been prosecuting 29 years, and you know, we have a duty to protect the public. The Constitution protects our right. We have a state constitutional provision, not just the Second Amendment, that only allows the legislature to regulate concealed carry. But now, as far as the background checks, I think we should. I reload guns. I shoot 1,000-yard target. I shoot at them. I don't always hit them, but you know, I hunt. I mean, I believe in the Second Amendment, and you know, but this is one of those situations where the criminals are going. They know that they can get around the background check, and felons go buy guns, and we've got a duty to protect the public.
Some big retailers, like,
if I might,
go ahead.
If I may respond, this is a situation in which Mr. Hood shot at the target and missed it. Because he missed it because he's for background checks, he is against the Castle Doctrine, and he claims that he's a supporter of the Second Amendment. That dog just won't hunt.
Mr. Hood, would you like to respond? I'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
I'm not against the Castle Doctrine. I have written about a dozen opinions upholding the right of people to carry weapons in Mississippi. And open carry, I mean, we have stood up for the state constitution in every way. And there he goes again, he's just making things up out of thin air.
All right, audience, thank you very much, audience. Some big retailers like Walmart are no longer selling military-style rifles. And Mr. Reeves, do you agree with that decision? And if so, should other retailers follow suit? I give you 30 seconds.
Well, let me say that retailers can make whatever decision they choose to make, but I think they're making the wrong decision because people have the right to buy the weapons that they want to buy. And so just like a large retailer may choose not to sell weapons, the public can choose not to shop at those retailers, and that's probably not a bad idea.
Mr. Hood, do you agree with what Walmart's doing? And other retailers, should they follow suit? You have 30 seconds.
You know, those are private companies. They have a right to make their own decisions as to what they're going to do, what liability they may expose their stockholders to. So those are decisions by private companies, and that's up to them.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Next question is coming from Greg.
And as you both know, there is an effort to put a question on next year's ballot, and this is about legalizing and regulating medical marijuana in the state of Mississippi. Mr. Hood, what do you believe? Should medical marijuana be legalized in some form in the state? You have 60 seconds.
You know, I started in the AG's office as assistant AG running the drug unit. I did 2 terms as a district attorney, 16 years as the attorney general. I've been a drug warrior for all those years, and it hadn't worked. And I think that medical marijuana is something that should be left up to the doctors in the medical profession. I've seen a few studies. I don't think we have enough yet. But I've seen a few studies that may help people get off of opioids. There may be some uses for marijuana. I just don't want to get in the hands of kids. That's why I've been raising Cain about vaping. I mean, because, you know, that was promoted as if it was going to help people get off of smoking. And we knew what was going to happen. We attorneys general, it went right in the hands of our kids, and you see them getting sick. And they're using marijuana in the vaping, the fluids. And so to answer your questions, I think that's up to the medical profession to make decisions. on the value of it for medical marijuana.
So, Mr. Reeves, let's hear from you. Should medical marijuana be legalized in the state? You have 60 seconds.
Well, Ely and I have 3 daughters, one 14, one 12, and one 7. And as a father of 3 girls, I'm going to vote against the amendment that's on the ballot next year. If I am elected governor and the people of Mississippi decide to vote in a different way than I do, then I'm going to uphold the will of the people. I believe in the democratic form of government, and so I am personally opposed to it, and I will not vote for it next year.
You're opposed to medical marijuana?
I'm opposed to the initiative that's going to be on the ballot next year.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Byron?
Kind of touched on this already, but the CDC has reported more than 1,000 illnesses across the country and 26 deaths related to vaping. In Mississippi, there has been 1 death and 5 illnesses. In light of the recent deaths and illnesses linked to vaping, a number of states have banned flavor vaping products. Mr. Reeves, should Mississippi ban vaping products? You have 60 seconds.
Well, I will tell you, I support President Trump. I supported him in 2016 as well, while the Attorney General was supporting Hillary Clinton. But I support President Trump in his efforts to keep these vaping products out of the hands of children. The flavored products are something that I think clearly we can all agree are being marketed to our kids, and I don't think that's right, and so I'm opposed to those.
Mr. Hood, should Mississippi ban vaping products? 60 seconds.
It should be regulated. In fact, I got some of my friends in the legislature to introduce a bill to regulate vaping products, make sure it's a sealed container so they can't mix in. I mean, we've busted Quick Marts around town there where they were actually mixing the vaping fluids. And we introduced that legislation, and Tate Reeves killed it. You know why? Because the tobacco companies gave him $95,000. That's what's happening over in our legislature. You know, it's endangering our kids, and I mean, I've got an app on our website about to explain to parents the dangers of vaping that we put up back earlier in the year. You know, this is a dangerous situation, and it needs regulation, and responsible legislators, leaders, would have stepped up, but because of that tobacco money, he didn't.
Mr. Reeves, would you like to respond to that? I'll give you 30 seconds to respond. Audience, let Mr. Reeves respond.
I would just say it's mighty ironic that a trial lawyer who has hired trial lawyers from all over the country and then been given literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in campaign contributions, a practice that the Wall Street Journal called a sleazy practice. And that is exactly what the Attorney General has done, not for the last 4 years or 8 years, but for the last 16 years. He's taken hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from these trial lawyers in campaign contributions. It's sleazy and it's wrong.
All right, Mr. Hood, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. You know, we brought back $3 billion to the state of Mississippi. And Tate Reeves is giving it away. The sleazy thing is he gave it to his buddies in exchange for campaign contributions, which in turn hurt us. And so that's what, if you want to talk about sleazy now, that is a problem in the legislature that we've got to stop. And the way we stop it is we make them subject to the Open Records Act so that we can see the comments that they're getting from emails and all those type things.
Mr. Reeves, you want to respond again? 15 seconds to respond.
Again, that was the Wall Street Journal that called it a sleazy practice, not me. It was the Wall Street Journal that called it a sleazy practice. It's because it is.
The Wall Street Journal is owned by robber barons. I mean, that's his people. That's who gave him the money to run.
All right, audience, thank you very much, audience. One last question on the vaping, then we're going to move on. The minimum age of sale for vaping products is 18 here in Mississippi. Should that age limit be higher, and if so, what should that number be? We're going to give that to you, Mr. Reeves. We'll start with you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
the minimum age for vaping in Mississippi is 18. Should that age limit be higher, and if so, what should that age limit be? You guys, we'll give you 15 seconds to respond.
I'd be open if that's what the people of Mississippi wanted to do, and that's what the legislature wanted to do. I'd be willing to consider raising that, but I will tell you that we allow men and women in the United States to go to war when they become 18 years of age, and I think that they are adults and can make decisions at that point. But that's certainly something I'd be willing to look at.
All right, Mr. Hood, 18. Should we raise the age?
The bill that we introduced would have provided that it's 21. It would have taxed it like tobacco, so we would have gotten some revenue from it. It would have regulated what is in it. It would have made sure that the pods were sealed. And there again, it was killed over in his Senate. We had an opportunity to help protect our children and send a message out there to the parents that don't know about these dangers. I mean, they look like a thumb drive. I mean, parents are not used to seeing those kind of things, and they don't know what it is. They don't know about the dangers, but we had a chance last year to do it, and I guarantee you if I'm governor, we'll introduce that bill again, and it will pass because he won't be over there to kill it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to move on. Our next question is coming from Greg.
And gentlemen, you have no doubt heard that students, faculty, and alumni were caught a little bit off guard last week with the announcement of Dr. Glenn Boyce as the next chancellor of the University of Mississippi. Interestingly, he wasn't on the list of candidates, but he was the head of the search committee for that new chancellor. Now, we've received feedback from numerous voters, some saying that the institutions of higher learning was not transparent with the decision to hire Dr. Boyce. And as you both know, the governor is the one who actually appoints the board members to the IHL. Mr. Hood, let's start with you. What can be done to avoid, at the very least, the appearance of impropriety? You have 60 seconds.
Well, I think that the appointments that I would make to IHL, they would certainly have an academic, some background in education, and that they represent not only the universities, but also the students, the interest of the students. And if they develop procedures, they ought to follow them. And so I would appoint those who are, and they'd be both Republican and Democrat. They would look like Mississippi. And there would be people that have academic backgrounds that have been to our state universities. And it would be people that make decisions. And if they develop a protocol, then I would certainly encourage them to follow that.
Mr. Reeves, give us your thoughts. What can be done to avoid the appearance of impropriety with the board? Take 60 seconds.
Well, I will tell you that the question regarding appointments is a very serious one. We went through a presidential election in 2016 in which the primary issue in that campaign was who was going to appoint federal judges. And since that time, President Trump has appointed 2 federal judges to the United States Supreme Court. He's appointed over 200 federal judges throughout our federal judiciary. And in this campaign for governor, I think the types of people that we're going to appoint are a very important issue in the election. If I get the opportunity to appoint judges to the Mississippi Supreme Court, which, by the way, right now 4 of the 9 justices were appointed by a conservative Republican governor. If I get an opportunity to appoint judges to the Mississippi Court of Appeals, which, by the way, 4 of the 10 judges on the Court of Appeals were appointed by a conservative Republican governor, I'm going to appoint conservatives. My opponent will appoint liberals to those spots, and we don't need that in the Mississippi judiciary.
All right, let's give this some more thought here, gentlemen. Let's, if you would, Mr. Hood, give me some more details, some specifics on how to make this process more transparent. You have 30 seconds.
Well, I think they had a transparent process. Apparently, it was not followed. But as far as, Tate's comments about our appointments to the court and different places, I would make sure that we had a committee. People like Judge Waller, that's people who I would invite to be on a committee. And we're going to have transition committees as far as appointments at IHL, and we're going to take a look at the Department of Education itself, and in education and the judiciary. And so I want to make sure that they continue and help me with my appointments.
Mr. Reeves, do you have some more details about how to make that process more transparent? 30 seconds.
Well, what I would tell you is if you go and you look at the campaign contributions that the Attorney General has accepted from trial lawyers all across the country, I mean literally hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of dollars, I don't think anybody in the business community in Mississippi believes that he's going to appoint non-trial lawyers to the bench in our state.
Let me give you 15 seconds to respond to that, Mr. Hood.
He didn't answer your question. About 10% of my contributions in this year have come from lawyers. The rest of them is from business. Business people want to see our state move forward. Our growth rate has been 2%. Tennessee has been 23%. What we're doing is not working. His leadership has failed. And as far as opening the process, he doesn't know how because he's over there accepting the legislature from the Open Records Act.
All right, you've opened it up to 15 seconds in rebuttal. Go ahead,
Thank you, if I might. Just today, campaign finance reports came out, and the Attorney General accepted $1 million from the Democrat Governors Association. That's the liberals that run the states of California and New York, and if you want a liberal to run Mississippi, he's your guy.
All right, we've
got to wait a minute now. Hold on.
Again, we'll have to ask the audience if we can.
He got $1 million from the Republican Governors Association. He did.
I think we've exhausted this topic here, gentlemen, that was our topic on the IHL, but I think we've exhausted that, so we'll move on to our next question.
Hey, and by the way, I will tell you, he's exactly right. I did get a contribution from the Republican Governors Association, and I'd be willing to stand on the stage with Republican governors from around the country and look at the way in which they're running their states. The question is, would Jim Hood be willing to stand on the stage with the governors of California and New York
we're trying to stick
and
to our
let them
time
talk
limit
about how they're running their states?
Trying to keep us on time and on task. So thank you very much. We certainly appreciate that. We'll move on to our next question. Thank you very much. Byron?
Good. Now we know where contributions are coming from. All right. Mississippi is one of the few states that levels its full sales tax on groceries. It's currently at 7%. Mr. Reeves, would you support rolling back the tax on groceries? 60 seconds.
Well, I will tell you, I've never seen a tax cut that I was against. I will tell you that we've championed the largest tax cut in Mississippi history just a few years ago, where every taxpayer in our state have received a tax cut. We eliminated the 3% individual income tax bracket. In addition to that, we've cut taxes over 50 times. The question here is, when you look at the proposals that Mr. Hood have made during this campaign, he has proposed $941 million in new spending. $941 million. Now, that's according to the Business and Industry Political Education Committee. It's not according to me. It's according to BIPEC. $941 million in new spending with no way in which to pay for it. And so while he's going to try to convince you that he's for cutting taxes, the fact is, if he's going to pay for all these things that he's promised all these different groups, he's going to raise your taxes. That's the only way to pay for it.
Mr. Hood, you've been very vocal about rolling back the grocery tax. How would you make up the reduction in revenue there?
We should roll back the grocery tax and make the cities whole at the same time. You know, Tate Reeves, he's not for working people. He doesn't help working people by giving them a tax break. He gives it to his big campaign contributors. I mean, he's giving away $765 million a year by the time these tax giveaways are phased in. Our general fund budget is $6 billion. He's given away $750 million in tax giveaways, and that is what's wrong with our state. That's why we don't have money for education, roads, and bridges. He's giving it all away for campaign contributions. So, you know, he's helped his wealthy friends out and not working people in the state. And certainly a grocery tax is something that we should pass that would give working folks one of these tax breaks.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Now go to Greg.
You know, gentlemen, Mississippi is the only state in the country without an equal pay law. 3 such bills did die in the recent legislative session. So, Mr. Hood, let's start with you. If elected, how much importance would you actually place on passing an equal pay law in the 2020 session? You have 60 seconds.
We're the only state in the country that does not have a law for equal pay for women. And that's ridiculous in this day and time. He's had 8 years to do something about it, and he's killed every bill that's been over there. And so we need an opportunity for women to get equal pay. That's not a big ask. You know, that they get paid the same, and they're not saying they get paid more, but certainly we should have an equal pay bill, and I would support that bill, and hopefully that'll be the first bill that I sign as governor.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Reeves, if you're elected, how much importance would you place on passing an equal pay law in the 2020 session?
Well, we have federal laws that ensure equal pay for equal work. I will tell you, my wife, Ely, works full-time. She works in the financial sector. And I will tell you that I am glad that every male in her office doesn't necessarily make the same thing that she does, because she knows what she's doing, she works her tail off, and she does phenomenally well. I'm honored to have her here with me today. Thank you for being here, Ely. Now, I'm sure our 3 girls are glued to the camera watching this tonight, don't you figure? But the reality is that I'm honored to have her on my side, have her working full-time. And, you know, we'll see what the legislature does. If they send us a bill, we'll certainly take a look at it.
Mississippi's minimum wage is currently at $7.25 an hour. It was last raised in 2008. Mr. Hood, is it time for the state to change the minimum wage law? Take 30 seconds.
That is not a living wage. People cannot live off of that. They have to live with their parents.
Is it time to raise it?
Or somebody. You know, that's a federal law, and that's up to the federal government as to whether it's raised. We don't have a state law at this point to set a minimum wage in state.
Mr. Reeves, do you think it's time to change the minimum wage?
Well, Mr. Hood is right. It is a federal law, and I think that the federal government's probably going to increase the minimum wage relatively soon, and I think that that's something that they probably should do.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Byron?
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Well, this debate has been focused on pinpointing differences between the two of you. And next is a question from a Southern Miss student. Listen.
My name is Allie Estorage. I'm majoring in political science pre-law, and my question to you is, what do you respect most about your opponent?
Good question from Allie. What do you respect most about your opponent? Mr. Reeves, we start with you. What do you respect most about your Mr. Hood? You have 60 seconds.
I'll tell you, Mr. Hood and I both got elected on the same day in 2003. And when he first got elected, he had small children. And since that time, Ely and I have had 3 little girls, and I respect the fact that he's chosen to serve in public office for a number of years. It's hard to do when you have small children. It's hard to do when you have children that are growing up when you're in the public eye. And so I respect the fact that he has chosen a life of public service during a time when he was raising his kids.
Mr. Hood?
Thank you.
What do you respect most about Mr. Reeves?
Well,
you have 60 seconds.
Thank you for your kind words, and I know as a father and you as a father that we understand who we fight for. My whole career, I have fought for working people, the widows, the orphans, the elderly, the children. And that's what I believe as a district attorney that we should be doing, is fighting for the least among us. And that's what I've done as Attorney General all these years, and that's what I want to continue to do as governor. Now, what I respect most about him, he sure knows how to raise a lot of campaign money.
All right, well, gentlemen, in fact, let's go ahead and give you 15 seconds to respond to that. Go ahead, Mr. Reeves.
The reality is, the reason that we've been successful raising campaign money is because the business community in Mississippi is scared to death of having a trial lawyer as our governor. He is the reason we've raised sufficient funds.
You know, there he goes around throwing around labels. He's trying to scare people. You know, the legislature will be a conservative legislature. Nothing liberal, nothing crazy is going to get through it. I don't even know a liberal who's ever come out of Holcomb, Mississippi, my hometown. I mean, the athletic director here at Southern Mississippi is from Holcomb, Mississippi, Jeremy McLean, and we're proud of him. I bet you can ask him. There's probably no liberals that came out of my hometown.
Well, I got to ask, how many people came out of Holcomb that endorsed Hillary Clinton for president?
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. At this point, it is time now for your closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds, and again, as it was determined earlier by the draw, Mr. Hood, you will go first. We'll start with you. 30 seconds for your closing statement, sir.
Well, thank you for having us here, Dr. Bennett, and those who have come and the viewers who have watched tonight. You know, this is a cornerstone election. This is important for our kids. So we've lost more kids the past 6 years than any other state in this country. And so our kids are leaving because we've got a 2% growth rate since 2009, and it's because he gave all of our money away. And so it's time for us to take our government back, keep our kids here, and get jobs so that Mississippi can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Mr. Reeves, you have 30 seconds for your closing statement.
Well, thank you, Greg and Byron, for hosting this tonight, as well as the Next Star family, as well as all of the affiliate stations around the state. You know, Ely and I both grew up in small towns in Mississippi. We both went to Mississippi public high schools. We then went to Mississippi colleges. We graduated and we got Mississippi jobs. I'm running for governor because I want our 3 little girls and your kids and your grandkids too to have that same opportunity. I'm Tate Reeves, and I'd be honored to have your vote.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your thoughts and your perspective and your willingness to serve the state of Mississippi. And now is the time. It's obvious that you have some passionate supporters here. Now is the time to let them go ahead and just let it all hang out for both of you for being here. Thank you so much.
Well, remember, the general election is on November 5th. The polls will open at 7 a.m., and you can find more information about the voting process on the Mississippi Secretary of State's office. Once again, we want to thank you very much. That will do it for our debate tonight. We are live from the Southern Miss campus here in Hattiesburg, and we thank you for joining us and for your participation, Mr. Hood and Mr. Reeves. Once again, live from the Southern Miss campus here in Hattiesburg. Everyone, make it a good night. And again, one more round of applause for our candidates tonight.
Yes, thanks for the lively audience. We appreciate you being here.